Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book, How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Between aging and busy lifestyles, many women struggle with maintaining their physical and mental wellness. At Aquavita Concierge Healthcare Services for Women, we can help you revitalize your health and reclaim your life. We start from within by balancing your hormones, allowing your body to achieve and maintain desired weight goals. We also specialize in peptide therapies, regenerative medicine, sexual health, and aesthetics in our state-of-the-art facilities. Feel better, look better, live better at Aquavita. Visit aquavitality.com and begin your journey today.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey y'all, Merry Christmas from me, your girl, Elena Grace, on this newest episode of I've Been Thinking. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I am so thankful that you're here. I am so happy, so joyous, and so thankful this holiday, Yule, Christmas season. So, welcome in. We are, of course, we have to. It's Christmas Eve. We are talking about St. Nicholas today. And yes, we are going to be talking about some history. We're going to be talking about kind of where the legend and idea of Santa Claus came from. And we're going to be talking about why I, at 26 years old, which is wild, by the way. I found out yesterday, I realized, thanks to a TikTok, that I'm officially too old to date Leonardo DiCaprio now, so that's pretty upsetting. But why I, at 26 years old, I still believe in Santa Claus. So, you want to get into it? Let's go. Ooh, but first, real quick, before we do get into it, I wanted to let y'all know, for all of my Patreon subscribers, the donations have been made. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I announced back in November that all Patreon, everything, not profits, I don't know exactly what proceeds mean, but everything that came from my Patreon subscribers in the months of November and December, that has all 100% been donated to some very important Appalachian charities. So first of all, and of course this was in the spirit of giving thanks and giving back and just giving for the holiday season. And I wanted to let you guys know, of course, on this Christmas Eve and in this episode that centers so very much on generosity, that those donations were made. So that was for the Linda Hand Center in Knox County, Kentucky, where I'm from, the Unicoi Public Library in Tennessee, and the Jared County Food Bank in Jared County, Kentucky. So if you want to know more about those, there is a blog post about it on the learn more about those charities and why I chose them, and you can go to their respective sites and Facebook pages, etc. But I just wanted to let everybody know that that has been done, and I am just so excited and so grateful that you all gave me the ability to do that this holiday season. I'm so, so grateful for that. So thank you guys. Okay, now, St. Nicholas, otherwise known as Nicholas of Bari or Nicholas of Myra, is one of the most popular of the minor saints, commemorated by both Eastern and Western churches, which is that's kind of a big deal. He is a patron saint of children and also of sailors, which I think is interesting. Children, I think, is really important because that clearly carries through with the legend. And sailors, actually, because he was born in a port town. And as most of us know, St. Nicholas is associated with the Christian festival of Christmas. Now, little is known of the historical life of St. Nicholas, other than that he was probably Bishop of Myra around the 4th century. Traditionally, like I said, he was born in the ancient Lycian seaport city of Peshara, and he traveled to Palestine and Egypt as a young person, as a child, and also like a teenager. Soon after his return to Lycia, he became Bishop of Myra, and then was subsequently imprisoned and most likely tortured by the Romans during the persecution of Christians under the Roman Emperor Diocletian. So that is crazy that that's a whole thing. Like, St. Nicholas was a prisoner. He was tortured. That's like not, that's not fun and festive. We don't talk about that. He was later released under the rule of Constantine the Great, the first of the great Christian emperors. And many think that he very well could have attended the First Council of Nicaea in 325, which is an incredibly pivotal, important point in history. The Council at Nicaea is one of those things that is just regularly, regularly referred to, regularly pointed to as being, this is important. This came from the Council at Nicaea. So just really interesting that St. Nicholas has this whole history we don't know about, and he could have been a part in some very exciting, interesting things. Now, his legend was created thanks to his reputation for generosity and kindness. And this is where stories of the miracles he performed for the poor began. St. Nicholas was reputed to have given gold marriage dowries to 3 girls who would have otherwise been forced into sex work due to their poverty. This one, I think, is super easy to believe, and I even very much hope this to be true, because this is an example of real Christ-like behavior. This is what you want to see from members and representatives of the church, and for a bishop to be acting like this. I think it's super important. And it's really interesting because it's not a miracle of the magical sense, but it's, it's life-changing. Absolutely life-changing for those 3 girls. And I think that this generosity and the fact that it was for 3 impoverished children, he was giving to 3 impoverished little girls, that's just super important. And you can see how that influences the legends that would grow from his legacy. And then there's another story about him, that he was reputed to have restored to life 3 children who had been chopped up by a butcher and put in a tub of brine for later consumption. Now, this one is obviously a little less believable. He magically, not only brought them back to life, but reassembled their bodies. They went like a little backwards boomerang and like came back together, just like no problem. I'm not sure about that. But, I wasn't there. Maybe it did happen. I don't know. Who am I to judge? I believe in magic. I believe in Santa Claus. But perhaps the reality was that he used his funding as a bishop of the church and his influence in the community to save 3 children who had been sold to a butcher, whose families were poor, who said, we don't have enough money to feed ourselves and, our other children. Let's sell these 3 to sacrifice them for the rest. And, maybe that was him restoring 3 children to life by buying them back and allowing them to continue living. Maybe he did restore someone to life. Who knows? And I'm not here today to question. Actually, I kind of am. But I do think that the repetition of the idea of children, the idea of the number 3, because that's like very specific and important, and also the generosity and the grace to impoverished people. I think that's super important. And the idea that he keeps saving people from these circumstances. So I think that those are super important ideas that follow throughout his legends and his legacy. Now, his popularity and devotion to him actually grew in the Middle Ages, and it extended across Europe. St. Nicholas became the patron saint of Russia and of Greece, of charitable fraternities, which again, charity and generosity, of children and sailors, like I mentioned. He was the patron saint of unmarried girls, which is super interesting and definitely has ties back to that legend of providing dowries to those girls who would have been forced into sex work. And he was also the patron saint of merchants, pawnbrokers, and of various other cities, just throughout Christendom, I suppose. So I think that those are all super interesting. And I think throwing in the patron saint of merchants is interesting too, because of the way that, purchasing gifts and just purchasing and capitalism would eventually tie back into this holiday that is so associated with St. Nicholas. Now, we talk about his popularity growing. Devotion to him in European countries actually dwindled post-Protestant Reformation. However, except in Holland, where the legend of Sinterklaas persisted. And perhaps because of this, the Dutch have actually been specifically credited with transporting St. Nicholas, or Sinterklaas, to what was then New Amsterdam, but what we know today as New York City. This includes this transportation of St. Nicholas, or Sinterklaas, includes the custom of giving gifts and sweets to children on St. Nicholas feast day, December 6th. Now, in Germany and Switzerland, the legend of Christkind, which celebrates to the Christ child, and Kris Kringle would develop. Now, Christkind is an angel-ish figure who often accompanied St. Nicholas on his missions of generosity, which that's super interesting that St. Nicholas, or Sinterklaas, would develop alongside of another concept, Christkind, that also embodies the Christ child. So it's like this melding of traditions and legends, right? And we kind of talked about the melding of a lot of traditions and legends last week when we talked about Christmas traditions around the world. So it's just really interesting to me how these come together. And thus, once again, St. Nicholas' legacy starts tying in with Yule traditions and the Christmas holiday celebration and the traditions of gift giving and of encouraging children to behave. Now, this is super cool. In Scandinavia, a jolly elf named Jultomten, Jultomten, he delivered gifts in a sleigh drawn by goats. Now, this is super important. In Scandinavia, elves are a massive part of folklore and tradition that perseveres today. They're still very massively culturally important. And thus we see that connection that eventually gets made between Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, elves, a sleigh being drawn by creatures, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's really cool. Plus, that sleigh drawn by goats also has pagan ties to the Norse god Thor and to the Yule goat as celebrated in Scandinavian countries. Again, go back and listen to last week's episode if you haven't, because it's really interesting. Now, another kind of interesting tie-in that we get, in Italy, a kindly witch named La Befana, which actually means the hag, which from a feminist modern perspective is mildly upsetting, but it's also interesting, and I'll explain why. So a kindly witch named La Befana rides about on a broomstick throughout Italy, and she drops down the chimneys of Italian homes to drop toys in the stockings of good little Italian bambinos. Now, going back to her name, La Befana, or the hag, is super interesting to me because of the legend, or not even the legend, the persistence of the threefold goddess in pagan tradition. We have the maiden, the mother, and the matron, or the hag, depending on the translation and also her representation and kind of how you're but anyway, representing the three aspects of a woman's life and the roles that she plays in society. So I think we can definitely take some offense from a modern perspective to her being called the hag, but the knowledge of the threefold goddess and this perhaps being a reference to that, I'm not sure. This is me kind of like just taking my understanding of pagan tradition and thinking, oh, this could apply. But yeah, this perhaps being a reference to that at some point is a really interesting part of the La Befana legend for me as a whole, especially because Christmas, as we know it, began as a pagan festival and then was later adopted by the Christian church because it was too popular to get the pagans to forget about it when they converted. Now, in France, and also in Louisiana, I don't know about it, I'm sure in tons of French colonies, Père Noël fills the shoes of good little French children, or Papa Noel, and once again, filling shoes with presents for good children. Just those common themes just follow throughout, across countries, across oceans, across borders. It's just fascinating to me. And then in England, Father Christmas, Papa Noel, Father Christmas, he visits every home on Christmas Eve to fill stockings with treats for the good little children. So it's just crazy to me. It's so fun to see how all of these legends intertwine with one another and how they all combine the legend and the history and the legacy and the pagan traditions. They all combine to create the idea of Santa Claus that we have today. The legend of the kindly old man, which has come down from the legacy of Saint Nicholas himself, Nicholas of Myra himself, was united with old Nordic folk tales and pagan traditions and legends of a magical man who punished the naughty and rewarded the good. And it makes a lot of sense how these all fold together and overlap so neatly, but also what's the word? They just overlap so beautifully. And, we have the patron saint of children, pagan and Nordic a lot specifically, magical traditions, encouraging children to be good and scaring them from being bad. We have a saint who's known for his generosity, and thus we connect that to giving gifts and rewarding, and, combine those two. You want to scare the kids from being bad, so you reward them with gifts and generosity for being good. I mean, it all just makes sense. It's just so fascinating, so fun to think about. Makes my brain go bing, 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 bing. So, I hope you like that. Then this is where we get the modern Santa, okay? Like I said, he was brought to New Amsterdam by the Dutch, yeah? That's what I said. Yes, the Dutch brought him to New Amsterdam, what we now know as New York City. And it flourished there, and of course it spread with immigrants moving about the country and the rise of popular media, etc. But the depiction of Santa that we know today is based on drawings by cartoonist Thomas Nast for Harper's Weekly, and he began these drawings in 1863. And these images were heavily influenced by the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, or more popularly, what we might know it as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Clement Clark Moore, the author of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, is also obviously responsible for the popularization of the reindeer pulling the magic sleigh. Because remember, in Scandinavia, St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus, or Sinterklaas, he drove a sleigh pulled by goats, and in Italy, she flew from house to house. So combine this, don't overmix it, and what do we get? We get a flying sleigh pulled by what's a little bit more palatable maybe than goats, a little bit more what's exotic than goats. What's something that lives in Scandinavia? Lives at, where are we going to say he lives at? The North Pole. That's far enough away. No kids can go looking for him. Reindeer. Now, then in 1931, illustrator Haddon Sundblom further influenced the image that we have of Santa Claus today when he illustrated Coca-Cola Santa Claus advertisements in 1931. And this Santa specifically was portly, white-bearded, and in a Coca-Cola red suit. So, there we go. Red-suited Santa. Now, here's the hot tea. Now that we have a nice little history of Saint Nick / Santa Claus wrapped up in a pretty tied bow, a bow far prettier than I could ever tie, he clearly isn't one specific magical being who drops down thousands of chimneys a second. I'm sorry, don't let your kids listen to this episode. But that doesn't matter because I still believe in him. Because Santa Claus doesn't have to be one specific real-life, flesh and blood, magical, immortal being with a litany of elves doing his bidding and reindeer that can fly for him to be real. Santa Claus is an idea, and that doesn't make him any less real than you or I. Santa, Sinterklaas, Father Christmas, Père Noël, these are all ideas that have been created and passed down through the generations, across cultures and across oceans. And it's an unspoken bond amongst people everywhere, a source of Christmas magic and childlike wonder. And the fact that he is an idea is what makes him immortal, because he lives on inside of each of us who perpetuate the legend, who celebrate a mysterious but generous man breaking into our homes and delivering wonderful gifts to well-behaved, well-deserving children. So that's why I believe in Santa Claus, because he is an immortal being living on inside of each of us in much the same way that many of us internalize the spirit of a loved one or an ancestor or conceptualize a religious entity living inside of us. And don't worry, this is not to call Santa Claus a god, more so to highlight the similarity of that idea of immortality being held in your memory and your spirit and your legacy. They say you never truly die until your memory is forgotten. So in that sense, St. Nicholas' name and legacy of generosity and caretaking of children being continued today is a beautiful way to make sure that he does live forever. And we're all taking part of that. So that's why I believe in Santa Claus. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope that today has been informative and fun and funny, maybe a little bit inspirational. I almost teared up there at the end. I hope you enjoy. Make sure that you listen next week. We're actually going to be dropping an important announcement next week. So make sure that you tune in. And I wish you all the most incredible Christmas. Make sure that you follow along with us at I've Been Thinking Pod on Instagram. Check out the blog I'veBeenThinkingPod.com for sources and a transcript from today's episode and for blog posts also. I'veBeenThinkingPod.com. And while you're at it, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/I'veBeenThinkingPod. Thank you guys so much for being here. I love you. Merry Christmas.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.